We're here in courtroom 13B of the Justice Center in Cleveland Municipal Court Housing Division. This is the housing court, and every week the drama of people's lives unfold, but also the condition of properties unfold in this courtroom. We have bench trials, sometimes we have jury trials concerning issues that come up here. And every week on Wednesday we have what is called the health docket, as well as the fire docket and the building docket. And in this courtroom, citizens come forward who have been charged with misdemeanors concerning their property under the health code, the building code, and the fire code. Our Wednesday prosecutor is here, who has an awesome responsibility, which is to handle cases that are brought by the inspectors from the health department, and primarily criminal cases are brought here on Wednesdays. Sometimes civil cases are brought in, but you prosecute those cases.
That is correct.
And what job responsibilities do you have as prosecutor on the health docket?
What we try to do, Your Honor, is to get the properties to come into code compliance. The codified ordinances of the City of Cleveland require that the houses be maintained at minimum code levels. That is what we are seeking to do in housing court. Once the inspector brings the case into court, we're dealing with a criminal violation at that time. What we try to do is ultimately, first and foremost, in the minds of both the city and I believe this court, is to bring the property into compliance. We will attempt to work with homeowners to bring the property into compliance.
Now, how can a citizen, a property owner, avoid being brought into housing court? And of course, you prosecute right from this podium, and the defendant stands here, and the violations that are cited hold penalties that can be quite severe. How can you avoid being brought into court?
Your Honor, without providing any legal advice to anyone, what happens is this process is initiated by the issuance of a notice of violation. If a notice of violation is received, the inspector's name as well as his or her phone number is on the violation. What a homeowner needs to do is to immediately contact the inspector to get an understanding as to what the violations are, what can be done to correct the violations, and that in turn will avoid a criminal case being filed in court if the violations are corrected.
So if you receive a mailing from the health department notifying you that you have violations, there's a time for compliance on there. If you observe that time for compliance, you will not be brought into court. Is that right?
That is correct, Your Honor.
And of course, if you don't observe that time for compliance and it was properly served, you then may be summoned into court with a complaint and have to see Cordelia Glenn here.
That is correct.
As well as the judge.
Yes. If a homeowner receives a summons, that homeowner has now become a criminal defendant. Sometimes what will happen is the homeowner will attempt to contact me prior to a court appearance. This does not avoid a court appearance, but it puts us on the path of having the violations corrected within a timely manner after the summons has been served.
What type of penalties do you recommend to the court if you're cited for having lead paint on your property and you failed to correct it?
Your Honor, the standard recommendation is a fine. It begins at a fine of $2,000 and 30 days incarceration at the workhouse. The city asked for such a large fine in a period of incarceration because it takes very seriously the health hazards that are posed to residents of a home that has lead-based paint there.
What triggers the attention of the city concerning lead-based paint problems at a property?
Your Honor, information is provided to the city's health department as to a child under the age of 6 who tests positive for lead-based paint, or I'm sorry, for lead hazard. At that point in time, an investigation is generated. The determination is made as to where the child resides at that time. It is then at that point in time that the homeowner of the residence where the child resides will receive a notice as to the lead-based paint hazards. They will receive a list telling them how they can correct it, what is expected, and the inspector to contact once the hazards have been abated.
So thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Your Honor.
We're happy to be here with Councilwoman Patricia Britt, who's the Councilwoman of Ward 6 in the City of Cleveland, but also the chair of the Health Committee in Cleveland City Council. And the Health Committee oversees the Health Department and a number of health issues that are important for the city. There are issues that they're looking into that have also been analyzed by the Center for Disease Control. I'm thinking of the mold issue in our city, and the Health Department keeps track of the vital statistics of our city, what people are dying from, what are some of the illnesses, and run the health centers of the city. And so the oversight function for all of those efforts would be the Health Committee of Cleveland City Council.
Yes, it would.
So thank you very much for being here.
My pleasure.
One of the issues that has come up in the city has been the issue of lead-poisoned children. And we're going to look into how this happens and why it's an issue in our city. But why is Cleveland City Council concerned about lead-poisoned children?
Cleveland City Council wants the city of Cleveland to be a leader in anything and everything that we can be. However, this is not one of those things, which we are. We are the leading city in the state of Ohio that has continuous elevated lead levels in children, particularly 1 to 5 years old. And we are we rank 8th of large cities in the nation. So we're not looking to be a leader like that. Unfortunately, we are. Our task is to help Cleveland to become as healthy a living environment for the people that live, work, and play in the city of Cleveland, the people that we represent. Mm-hmm. So we have a huge stake in the health and welfare of the people that we represent.
And generally, the lead-poisoned children are centered in certain census tracts where it appears to be higher. And I presume that those census tracts would be the areas where the homes are the oldest.
Yes. One of those, there are 3 neighborhoods in the city of Cleveland, one of which is in Ward 6, Fairfax. So Glenville, Fairfax, and Huff have the highest number of elevated lead levels. And it is because the homes are so much older. And anything painted before 1978 is bound to have lead. Anything painted and built prior to 1978 is bound to have lead paint in it.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Jonathan Brandt, who is with the Cleveland Department of Health, is the project director for the lead initiative that is being led by the Environmental Health Department and the Department of Health, is here with us to talk a little bit about what are the implications for the homeowner, how do we tell whether there's lead on the property or not, and then what do we do if there is lead on the property? Now, do you think there might be lead on this property?
Well, Judge, this house was built in the early 20s, and most likely there is lead on this property.
All right, and how would you determine whether there's lead or not here?
Well, during our testing, and we use this particular instrument, this is a Niton analyzer. It's a very sophisticated piece of equipment. We'll basically put it on a surface, and it will tell us whether there is lead there or not.
And how many of those do you have at the health department?
Well, we have about 6 of them.
6 of them.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there are 224,000 or so housing units in the city of Cleveland, 100,000 1- and 2-family homes. How many homes do you think may have lead in them?
Well, it's really hard to say, but a good guess would be about 85,000.
85,000. Well, that's quite a few tests for those 6 detectors.
That is correct, but we're not, our initiative doesn't mean that we're going to test every house.
I see. Well, the lead, as we discussed earlier with Councilwoman Pat Britt, the chair of the Health Committee, and also Prosecutor Cordelia Glenn, is something that the city is looking at because, unfortunately, the city of Cleveland rates so high in the number of lead-poisoned children. And in fact, in the country, our numbers are up in the top 10.
That is correct, Judge.
So that's why you're conducting this initiative. And I see that on this doorway here, there's peeling paint and appears to be several layers of paint. And how do you determine if there's lead in that paint?
So what we would do is we'll take our analyzer and we'll put it on the surface here. Okay, and the analyzer within a minute or so of time will tell us whether there's lead paint here or not. Now we do on housing like this, see, it's telling me already that, that there's some lead here. Okay, and
Does it tell you how much lead is there?
well, it gives us a relative rating on
Mhm.
it in milligrams per centimeter squared, which is a technical term, but there's a sufficient amount here that where this scraped off, it could cause a hazard.
Well, if you're a homeowner faced with this, two types of property owners. One, an owner-occupant. You live in the house. What steps do you take in the city of Cleveland? There's federal regulations, there's state regulations, there's city ordinances now, but there's also going to be new city ordinances. So what do you do if you find that you have lead-based paint?
Well, first off, Judge, we would want to encourage everybody to keep their property in a very good condition. So if they do have some peeling paint, we would encourage them to go ahead and repair that paint properly. Now, what we're saying properly is there is a way in which you can do this safely, and we would be happy to train anybody who is interested in this and how to do that. And essentially it means taking a few extra precautions, working wet to work safe.
What did you mean when you said work wet in order to remove those paint chips?
That's a very good question, and I'm glad you asked it. Okay, what I have here is a basic scraper. Okay, now this is common to any paint renovation, but what we also have here is a spray bottle. Okay, now this spray bottle can contain water or water with a little detergent in it. The idea of this is not to create dust. So what I'm scraping on here, what I want to do is I want to wet the surface down, okay, and then I'm going to take my scraper and I'm going to scrape the surface here where it's wet. Okay, now all of that, of course, needs to go somewhere. So when you're done scraping it, it's going down on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Now we want to make sure that on the ground there is a cleanable surface. Now in this case we have flagstone here, so this is a relatively cleanable surface. So as long as I stay wet in here, then I can sweep these up, put them in a bag, and put them in my garbage. If this were the side of my house where I had a lot of plants, or just the side of my house where I had grass, I'd want to put plastic down on here, and we recommend a 6 mil thick plastic, which is available from any hardware store. And we put that out, and we do all of our scraping for the day. We make sure that those surfaces are wet as we clean up, roll it up, get the paint chips to the middle, pick them up with a wet paper towel, put them in a bag, tie up the bag or tape up the bag, put it in the garbage, and then we can use this plastic again the next day.
Now, you do that, but what if you have a 1 and 2 family home and it's a rental property? What do you do if you see this lead base paint here chipping on your property? There has not been a child poisoned in your house, elevated lead level. What do you then do? What's the procedure?
What we want to have people do who are investor owners or people who own property, may live in it, we want them to be smart about what they're doing. Stay ahead of the game. Obviously, if the house looks like it has chipping paint on the outside, it's a wise thing to correct that. Not only for the purpose of making it look better, but obviously if the paint is cracked, it's going to do some damage to the house and it's going to make the house in worse shape. So we encourage them to fix that paint, lead safe, as we've explained, but that if you're an investor owner and you have rental property, a permit is required in the city of Cleveland before you attempt that job. And one of the main reasons for this permit, Judge, is simply to pass information to the person who's going to be doing the work so that they know how to do it properly.
Now, if you have an investment property, a 1 and 2 family house, and you're going to tackle something of this size and nature, do you need to pull a permit?
For exterior painting?
Yes.
Not from the health department.
Okay.
But let me get this straightened out a little bit. If you're not living in the property and you own this property and you're renting this property out, then a paint removal permit is required from the health department.
Okay. A paint removal permit, what if you're just going to scrape some of this paint off and then prime over it?
Now let's say that this is the exterior of a property. If I'm only going to do work on this one section here, which is less than 20 square feet,
Yes.
a permit's not required for this.
Okay.
What we're talking about is completely scraping the entire exterior of the house and then
Okay.
repainting it.
I see. What type of things are prohibited when you're maintaining your home? And of course, if you can keep ahead of the game and maintain your home, you also keep ahead of the lead abatement inspectors
That's correct.
and the housing and building
That's
inspectors.
correct.
So if your home is maintained, the paint is tight on the property, then you won't have to worry about
We'll come
those
by and we'll
visits.
say, what a nice house.
What a nice house. But if you then determine that there is that problem, what steps do you take? What type of things can't you do? You can't dry scrape, that's one
That's
thing.
correct.
You can't use a blowtorch.
That's right.
Uh-huh.
That's exactly right.
You-
Now, one of the most common things that is done that is prohibited is taking a power washer and washing a house and spraying all of those chips out onto the ground or into the neighbor's driveway. That is prohibited practice.
So you could no longer use a power washer.
Under those circumstances. Now, in your permit, when you pull the permit from the health department, it does allow you to say that you're going to be doing this, but you have to do it in a lead-safe manner, and meaning that all of the water has to be captured in some way.
Onto a tarp.
Onto
or
a tarp,
plastic
and that the
tarp.
chips that are blown out are cleaned up.
Okay.
So it is possible, but
It's
it has to
possible
be
to
done
use.
correctly.
It's possible to use a power washer and to be given permission to do so, but it must be done according to a certain procedure where you would catch all the paint
That is
chips.
correct, and that's quite a difficult procedure, so we don't recommend it at all.
Can you use chemical removers?
Chemical strippers are allowed. They're rather cost prohibitive, but in certain circumstances where the house is historic or you have a lot of small areas, chemical strippers are allowed. The only one that's not allowed is any chemical stripper with methylene chloride in it, and those are no longer made for residential use.
If you have a lead-poisoned child in your home, then that brings in some other rules and some more scrutiny into the home. And do you differentiate between owner-occupied and investor-owned property with a lead-poisoned child?
Lead poisoning in children is quite a misunderstood type of disease. First of all, lead poisoning in children is the only environmental disease of children that is perfectly preventable. A child crawls on the ground or finds a lead-based paint chip and ingests it. It raises the amount of lead in their blood, and it's a very small amount. It's 10 micrograms per deciliter. Now,
Well,
that's
how much is 10 micrograms per decimeter?
That's
How
a
much is that?
scientific term your doctor knows, but
Uh-huh,
let me
okay.
demonstrate something here.
All right.
Now, what I'm going to hold up here in a second, Judge, is a small amount of lead dust in a vial, okay? Now, the amount of lead dust in this vial is enough to fail clearance, what we call clearance, or the cleanup of a property that has been abated of lead hazards on a floor. Now, this is 40 micrograms of lead.
I only see a very small speck, maybe 2 specks on this, hardly even visible.
If a child were to ingest all of this into their system, they could become lead poisoned, okay, depending on several other factors.
And what are the other factors?
Well, the other factors are the child's age, the child's body mass, the size of the child, how healthy the child is, the type of diet that child eats. So all of those are factors. And they're the same factors that are common to every disease. But in this case, lead poisoning is directly related to an environmental issue.
And the lead poisoning, what are the consequences of lead poisoning?
A child who's lead poisoned could have several effects. The main effect is when a child is developing, their nervous system is developing as well, and the lead interferes with the development of their nervous system. So we can have learning disabilities, we can have behavioral problems that are created from this, and the key thing to this, Judge, is it's permanent. There is no cure for this. The cure is prevention. Now this
next
one
vial.
here, that's a lot of dust in there, okay?
A lot?
A lot.
It doesn't seem too much to me, but
In your house, Judge, if we were to spread this around your house, we would make it unsafe for a child to crawl around in that house. It would contaminate the entire property.
just this amount
Just that
would
amount.
contaminate it.
And if we were to solidify that, it would look like this card, okay?
It'd be the size of this card. This is the amount of dust, lead dust, that would contaminate an entire home.
If that were ground up
Uh-huh.
and looked like that vial
Right.
right there, this is enough to contaminate a 1,700 square foot home. Can I explain the process a little bit? I
Yes,
think that
please.
would be, okay. Here's what happens when we have a lead poisoned child. First of all, it's a reportable disease in the state of Ohio. So therefore, if a doctor tests this child and they have an elevated level, they have to report it. gets reported to the state of Ohio, and the state of Ohio reports that to us. Now, depending on the level of the child's blood, we have to investigate those. So if the child has 15 micrograms per deciliter or more, we have to go out and investigate why that is. And if we find hazards in the home, we're going to put that home under a lead hazard control order. That order means the homeowner, if they're an occupant, is no longer allowed to correct the problem. They must hire a lead abatement contractor, and this is where the problem gets in with expenses, because under the state of Ohio law, you must abate the hazards. You cannot correct the hazards by anything other than abating them, which means removing the hazard. In a lot of cases, if there are window hazards, the window cannot be repaired sufficiently to remove that hazard, so it has to be replaced.
What are some resources for people if they'd like to find out if their home has lead paint in it? What should they do?
Well, first off, let me explain a couple of things about knowing, okay? The federal law in 1998 came out with something that's called a disclosure law. So if you know you have lead-based paint in your house, or suspect that you have, and you're renting that property, you need to let those tenants know, and you have to have documentation of that. Now, as far as resources, the City of Cleveland is the beneficiary of the HUD program, so we have some funds that we've set aside for low-income housing individuals to do some of this work.
How do you access those funds?
Well, we have an application process. They can call us, and we'll send them out an application, and then we'll take their information in and determine whether they qualify for our program. And if they do qualify for our program, then we will go in and we will make that house lead safe. We will look at the hazards as they stand and find the best way to control those hazards. Now, we're currently working with the state of Ohio to bring in some testing kits to be given out. So we don't have them yet, but they're coming. And yeah, they're available. So if people are interested in finding out whether they may have dust hazards in their home, they can certainly call us and we can put them on a waiting list to get one of these kits.
We're pleased to have Irene Fomby, who is an environmental technician who goes out day in, day out in the city of Cleveland testing for lead paint hazards. Irene, what do you do to test for lead in this type of situation?
Normally we test three components of the window. We usually test the casement of the window, our sash, and our well. And we use a dust sampling method to see how much dust we do have in wells.
How does that work?
We get some gloves.
You're like a surgeon, I see.
Yeah, something like that. We always make sure to have gloves on. We don't want to take dust from there and take it to another place if I'm sampling.
Oh, I
so if I'm
see.
sampling this, I don't want to put my hands on here and then put my hands on the floor.
Oh, I see, because it could give a false reading for some other place if the dust came from here.
Right.
Okay.
So I have a Palin test wipe, and we have our 1x1. Okay. So I put it in between my fingers, and this is the proper way to wipe. So
Yes.
we would go like this in an S motion. Then we would fold the wipe, and then this way.
Oh, so you test it in two different directions then, is that right?
Right, I wipe in two different directions to pick up all the dust in this area. And then I just fold it. And we have it in our centrifuge tube. And this would be our sample.
And then do you take it to a lab and test it?
Yes, it's mailed out to a lab, and our samples usually come back within 24 hours when we're able to determine how much lead dust was in that sample.
And so with the friction with windows and the sills, in many homes that's a place where there may be lead problems.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
What are some of the resources that people would have available to them if they want to find out more about lead paint in a home, removal of lead paint? Are there some websites that they can see, or does the Department of Health have some information for them?
Yes, Judge, that there are many resources out there. The Department of Public Health has several brochures that are available. We have some pretty good ones about home renovation, and we'd be happy to distribute those to any of our listeners today. We also have a website at clevelandhealth.org. They can access information there from all of the other websites that we've tied into across the United States.
Such as Environmental Health Watch and the HUD
That's correct.
Site.
HUD sites and CDC and some other information.
Is there some information on the loan programs on that site yet, or?
Not on the site, but
at some point in the future, perhaps?
Yes, we're putting it up there as we speak. We have one webmaster for the entire department, so it's getting a little slow, but if they call us, we can send out the information that they would need.
If you find that you want to try to remove the hazard from your home, are there some tools that are going to be available through the Cleveland Department of Health? I know that one of the things they recommend is that there's a special type of vacuum with a HEPA filter. Are there any of those that are available?
Yes, Judge, we have 6 of those available. Currently they're being refurbished and they should be available within a week or two, and those are on loan. Those are for loan programs. So.
And those would be through people who already are through the health department for people who are participating in one program or the other.
Well, actually, they're for anybody who calls us. We'll lend them out to anybody. We're going to be distributing those through some of the local neighborhoods, usually in the areas that have the highest risk, but we'll also put some in areas that have a little lower risk.
Okay, so you're focusing in on certain areas in Cleveland where there have been lead-poisoned children. Those census tracts or zip codes that have the highest number of lead children will receive the majority of the attention, but anyone in the city of Cleveland can take advantage of that.
Absolutely. The city of Cleveland is considered an at-risk city, so every census tract within the city is eligible for our program, as long as they meet the income requirements.
Right. So it sounds to me that preventive maintenance is the most important aspect of how you can prevent lead hazards in your home. And you can, if you're a landlord, you can have your home certified as being lead safe. You can even take extra steps, and with removing the lead from the property, you can be certified as being lead free as part of a new city program. Is that right?
That is correct. Any property that was built between 1950 or after 1950 and is pre-1978, so 1950 to 1978, if they have an inspection done and that inspection finds that there are no lead hazards in that property can be certified as lead safe.
This is particularly important for investor owners who may find that some children in their home are lead poisoned, and if it's been certified as lead safe or lead free, then the presumption somehow shifts. Because there have been some lawsuits involving lead poisoned children where there have been damages that have been awarded to tenants whose children have been lead poisoned.
That's correct. That's correct.
I want to thank you, Jonathan Brandt and Irene Fomby, for taking time today to inform us on what we can do as citizens of Cleveland and for those people who own property to reduce the lead hazard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judge.